Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. Today's is a solo episode, and I wanted to talk a little bit about relationship with food and how you can go about improving your relationship with food if this is something that you struggle with. So, as you all know, if you follow me, I compete in bodybuilding and I have done for the last 5 years now. I don't really talk about this too much very often, but I used to really, really struggle with my relationship with food prior to this. Quite a lot, and I had quite a negative relationship with food as I was going through university. I studied sport and exercise science at uni. Obviously got really heavily involved and interested in kind of nutrition. And basically it ended in a point where I did not have a very, very good relationship with food. And there's a lot of coaches out there nowadays, or in general, that looking from a bodybuilding perspective and a prep perspective, there's a lot of coaches that will just diet people when potentially their relationship with food is not in a position to do so, and they'll just push people to get on stage when it's probably not the best thing for them. And obviously I understand that bodybuilding, it can have negative connotations. People that have come from potentially, a place where they have struggled with their relationship with food, or have potentially had, an underlying eating disorder, or even, a diagnosed eating disorder. It isn't always going to be the best option for someone that struggled with something like that to then go into a sport that is heavily focused around food control, dieting, and physique analysis in terms of constant check-ins. And obviously the sport is literally based off what you look like, right? So there's a lot kind of out there in terms of, if you have struggled with your relationship with food, then you shouldn't be going into bodybuilding, or kind of going down the physique development route with things. So obviously I work with girls who are either getting on stage, or they're doing photo shoots, or they're heading more down the physique development route. But I do also have a lot of clients that aren't going down that route, that are purely either coming from a point of wanting to work with their relationship with food, or just want to lose a little bit of weight, want to feel a little bit better in themselves. And many of them then transition more down the physique development route later down the line. Not all of them, but some of them do go down that route. So obviously I have, a lot of experience working alongside girls that potentially do struggle with their relationship with food. I work alongside girls, a couple who are working with qualified dietitians, or people that are professionally qualified to support them with their eating disorder, and I will then work alongside that professional as well to help guide them in terms of a more one-to-one basis, around the clock support type thing. So I do have a lot of experience working alongside girls who maybe do struggle with their relationship with food. And I think a lot of people who have potentially come from a very, very extreme approach and are now struggling with their relationship with food, I work with a lot of girls like that as well. So I do have a lot of experience with that. And obviously I have come from that route myself in terms of struggling with it. So I obviously understand how it can feel to go through that. Obviously, I'm not professionally qualified in the sense of, I'm not a, dietitian. I'm not an eating disorder specialist. I am a coach that has a degree in sport and exercise science, and I have a lot of experience. Obviously I'm a qualified PT, but a lot of experience working alongside girls in terms of their nutrition, their habits, their relationship with food. But obviously, I will never work with someone if I feel like it's out of my scope of practice. So I just wanted to touch on that first. And today's episode is going to be about relationship with food and sort of how you can go about improving that. But I just wanted to kind of point that out first. And also, just a note that obviously within bodybuilding, because it does have such an extreme focus and it is a sport at the end of the day, you need to make sure, if this is something that you want to get into, your relationship with food does need to be in a very, very good position. And I think, bodybuilding, I think if you do it properly, if you want to compete, if you do it properly, it can it can be a really positive thing to do. It's not always got these negative connotations that a lot of people put to it, in terms of it like ruining your relationship with food and making you really obsessive. I think if you put the work in beforehand and you are in a very good starting position, you can go and do bodybuilding and get on stage with very minimal, if any, negative effects. Lot kind of following that. Obviously, there are some negative things that come with that, obviously pushing to that extreme, but it is a sport. And I think if you are educated and you work alongside a coach that does have your best interests at heart, and not someone that just wants to get you on stage, obviously you can do that in sort of like the safest way possible as such. So just wanted to touch on that. And as in my opinion as a coach, like you should never pursue physique development if that means it is going to sacrifice your relationship with food, because I think that's where potentially I'm a little bit different, in that yes, I do help girls get on stage. Obviously I get on stage myself, but at the end of the day, like, your health matters. And I think that is so important, like more than anything else. Health, relationship with food, like that is important. And if it is getting to the point where you are pushing for a physique-based goal, and that is really negatively impacting your relationship with food, then it's just, like, in my opinion, not worth it. So yeah, just wanted to kind of touch on that. And like I said, I did struggle, and I spent a lot of years, it must have been potentially like 3 or so years, actually working on my relationship with food. So I actually struggled with binge eating. It was very, very bad at one point, and I was in a position where I was like, oh my god, this is just like me, I'm never going to get away from this. And it took me like a good 3-4 years of actually working relentlessly at that to get in a position where I was like healthy, happy, and it wasn't a part of my life anymore. And I was actually I was dabbling in bodybuilding a little bit at the start of that journey as well. For me, I had to kind of take a step back, focus on me, my health, my well-being, and it just kind of naturally built itself back into my life again. And now I'm in a position where, like, I'm absolutely fine. I'm happy, I'm healthy, I do it because I love it. And again, I would never take it to the extreme where it does have any long-term negative effect on my relationship with food. So I think it's just important to consider, if you are wanting to go down that route, that you need to have a really, really solid relationship with food, because obviously it is a tough competitive sport at the end of the day, right? So anyway, a little bit of an intro, a little bit of background on kind of me and like who I work with. So what I wanted to do was talk through some of my tips in terms of if you are someone that struggles with your relationship with food. Like I said, I do have a lot of clients who I work with on a one-to-one basis on this. Then I want to go through some tips in terms of how you can start improving that, and potentially looking at, what can you do to get yourself in a better position with your relationship with food. So the first thing that I would say with this is you need to spend time away from dieting, because if you are struggling with your relationship with food, you're finding yourself like binge eating, or, potentially overly restricting with it, then you telling yourself that you have to eat less and pull down more is not going to help improve that relationship with food if you are already struggling with that. And I'm speaking from experience here. Like, if you pull down your food, you will just end up in a really negative cycle of like pulling down your food, telling yourself you're going to stick to it, and then kind of overeating, making yourself feel guilty for that, and then restricting your food. And it just ends up in a really, really horrible cycle of binge restrict. One thing that I want to say with this is, if you are genuinely struggling, make sure you reach out and get professional help. Like, if you speak to a coach and they generally have your best interests at heart, they will refer you to someone who is a qualified person to work with someone that has a diagnosed eating disorder. So it's super important that if you are struggling with this, you get kind of specialist help. And then obviously you can work with coaches that can sort of work together with that specialist that will help you move forward in a proper way, like a healthy way, as you should be. So yeah, as I was saying, first thing is obviously spend time away from dieting. If you are struggling with your relationship with food, like, one of the worst things you can do is to set yourself up with a restrictive diet, because it's just like your relationship with food is not going to improve if you are constantly restricting all the time. So, you know, that might mean if you are tracking your food, it might mean increasing your calorie intake. I know that when I was struggling with this, I was tracking my food and I just basically increased my calorie intake and brought it up to a level where, you know, I was actually feeling full and satisfied. Because obviously, if you are struggling with your relationship with food and you are consistently hungry, that's not going to help. It's not going to, when we're talking here with things like maybe binge eating, stuff like that, you know, it's not going to help your relationship with food if you are, you know, consistently being restrictive and pulling back with your nutrition targets. So making sure you're in a position where, you know, your calorie targets are actually in a decent place so you can eat the food you enjoy, you know, you're not hungry all the time, you feel full, and you feel satisfied. That's probably the first thing that I would recommend. Second thing, which I think is super important, and this is not, you know, not just in regards to potentially struggling with an eating disorder, but, you know, this also could be on the front of kind of just generally keeping your relationship with food in a really good spot, would be to focus on like an inclusive diet. So basically add into your diet, not taking things away. Because again, if you are telling yourself, I can't have this, I can't have that, this is a bad food, like that's not going to be improving your relationship with food. So if you can actually focus on including the food you enjoy rather than telling yourself you can't have XYZ, you know, focusing on actually adding these foods to your diet, making sure you are eating foods every day that you enjoy. And again, like with the girls that I work with, in order to keep all of their relationship with foods in a positive place, you know, we'll look at, right, what foods do you enjoy eating? Can we, you know, include some of those foods on a daily basis, you know? And I'm not saying go off and smash family sharing bars of chocolate, but maybe, you know, if you do really enjoy chocolate and it's something that you like eating, you know, and it's something that maybe you have told yourself you can't have in the past, maybe having a little bit of that every day in moderation is going to work so much better than you telling yourself you can't have it at all, you know? So it's just looking at remembering that, you know, you can include the foods you like, even if you are going to a, you know, a more extreme approach. If you are doing a photo shoot or comp prep or going down that route with it, you know, you can still eat the food you enjoy within that, within, you know, the goals that you have as such. So I think it's just really important to make sure that you are including the foods that you enjoy within your everyday diet. The third point is to make sure you are addressing any like underlying causes. So a lot of the time when people are struggling with their relationship with food, it may come down to, you know, a stress management coping mechanism, or, you know, a way of managing, you know, other stresses in life, or potentially a way of, you know, for a lot of people it is often, you know, something that is used as a bit of a coping mechanism. So looking at making sure you're getting enough sleep, you know, you're reducing stress, you're finding ways of managing stress, because if you can put things into place, you know, to make sure that you have good energy levels, you are getting good night's sleep, you are kind of managing stress, you're keeping stress at bay, it's finding methods that allow you to kind of cope with that, rather than, you know, rather than if you are potentially struggling with your relationship with food, rather than using food as like a coping mechanism as such. And it's something that, you know, if you are struggling, you really need to sit down and think, right, why do I feel like this is happening? Like, potentially, is there a certain time that I feel like I'm struggling a bit more? You know, dig a bit deeper and see if you can unpick some of the underlying causes as to maybe when you feel like you do struggle with your relationship with food a little bit more. The next thing is to make sure you have a really clear structure. And I think this can massively help in terms of just giving you, you know, a little bit more consistency with your meals and your timings, and making sure that you're not getting to the point where you're super hungry. And also to improve your decision making as well, because if you have a fridge and it's stocked full of like meal prep and you've got loads of healthy foods there and it's all ready to go, and you're sort of eating regularly to the point where you're not really getting that hungry, you know, you are going to feel so much better in yourself than having a breakfast and then not eating all day and then not having anything ready in the evening. So if you can create that consistency, and get to the point where you have meals that are ready to go, you know, you getting in and being really hungry and just being able to grab something out of the fridge and bang it in the microwave, that's going to lead to you making a much better decision with your food and probably feeling so much better than, you know, you go massively prolonged period of time without eating and then not having anything prepared. So I think preparation is key, having structure, eating regular meals, like all of these things to help build up a solid routine are going to help keep your relationship with food in a really good place, and mean that if you are struggling with it, you know, it just creates that consistency, it creates that routine. I'm not saying stick to a meal plan, but, you know, just having an idea of, right, I've got kind of 4 or 5 like really well balanced nutrient dense meals here I can eat throughout the day. I'm not going to get to the point where I'm really, really hungry. You know, I'm in a position where it's all good to go. And I know that, you know, that's going to keep me ticking over all day without getting to the point where, you know, you're going to be super hungry and it's going to lead to you maybe, you know, not having a proper meal or not fueling yourself properly. And then one of the last things that I think can be super helpful if you feel like potentially you are struggling with your relationship food is actually taking the focus away from the aesthetic side of things. So looking at, you know, rather than focusing on weight and photos, looking at, okay, how are you fueling yourself? Like, are you feeling yourself well? How is your training performance? Like, are you getting stronger? Because if you can put the focus into other areas, again, it allows you to focus on food as a positive thing, fueling your performance, driving yourself forward, rather than it being like a negative thing that, you know, is leading you to feel XYZ way about your body and focus overly on the aesthetics. And I think the big thing with this is, right, it doesn't have to be forever. So, you know, as speaking again from experience, like, I think from my experience, now, I struggled with my relationship with food in the past, but I'm now in a position where I do bodybuilding, which is a physique-focused sport. And, you know, if you can spend time working on it, you can get to a place where actually you have a really solid relationship with food. You can pursue physique-based goals. You can kind of build a muscle. You know, you can diet again at some point in the future if that's something you want to do. But I just think, you know, if you are struggling, it's really worth just taking a step back and spending the time actually reassessing your goals, thinking about the long term and actually putting that work in. And I know, again, going to like people that are competing and doing shoots, like there are going to be so many people out there that have come from maybe comp preps or post comp prep that are now in a position where they feel like they are struggling a bit with a relationship with food. And like, I promise you, the best thing you can do is actually all the things I've mentioned and just take that focus away from, you know, from the aesthetics for a little while and put your effort into actually the other side of things. And, you know, you can come back to the physique based stuff later down the line, but it's really, really worth spending that time just working on, you know, your relationship with self, your relationship with your food, and actually just moving the focus away from having to diet, having to get smaller, having to get leaner. And I just wanted to do this podcast because, you know, there is a lot, obviously I work, you know, I'm a bodybuilder, I post a lot about competing and physique based stuff, and I think not many people have seen the side where it's like, actually I did really struggle with my relationship with food, and I have a lot of clients that struggle, and it is something that you can work on and you can improve. And I think a lot of people think, well, I'm either a bodybuilder or I'm, you know, I don't want to do bodybuilding at all, or I don't want to pursue physique goals. I just want to be, you know, kind of down the holistic route. And you don't have to be in one camp or the other. Like, you can still work on your relationship with food and then maybe pursue physique based goals later down the line, or, you know, or there's no right or wrong way of doing it. And I think, you know, if you are maybe coming from a comp prep or you are thinking about it, just make sure your relationship with food is rock solid, because it is so worth the time, like, spending getting that right. And like I said, even though I do compete, I do work with a lot of clients where we really work on their relationship with food, and it is so worth it for long-term success. So if this is something that you are struggling with, you want to chat with me about, maybe, you know, you've been through a comp prep or you're thinking about it and you are struggling, please just reach out to me. Obviously, I've been there and I now compete, and, you know, life is good. So if you do have any questions, you want to chat to me anymore about this and find out more about kind of what I do, please feel free to drop me a message. And yeah, hopefully this helped.